Hey guys, this is John here with Vern Eide, and we are on a podcast called Is This Thing On? I'm here with our guest Adam Weber, pastor, podcaster, author.
All the above.
Yeah, jack of all trades. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here.
Just wanted to see if you can give us a quick intro. Tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of where you started, where this all stemmed from. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's an honor to be with you, John. So I'm a born and raised South Dakota kid.
Sweet.
Grew up in the northeast part of the state. Son of an electrician and a principal. My mom's a principal, and never saw myself ever doing what I do. Most days I still can't believe I do what I do.
Yeah.
But
Was it something that you just dreamt of doing, or how did it, you know what I mean?
Even to this day, I'm like, am I really a pastor? Like, what is going on? So I grew up in the church and was the one kid in the family that struggled with all of it.
Sweet.
And when I say struggle with all of it, struggled with even a belief in God whatsoever.
Yeah.
So really struggled. I went through confirmation as a freshman in high school. On the day I got confirmed, I told my parents it was the most I'd ever lied into so many people at one time, because I said I believed in Jesus, and I absolutely did not believe in Jesus. So I had just a transformation in high school where I came to Christ, but even still really didn't see myself anything ministry-wise.
Sure.
I have just an entrepreneur heart. And so I went to Augie for business and marketing, and that's what I thought I would be doing, was bringing faith, God into the workplace that way, rather than being a pastor. And
Sure.
So filled in for a pastor summer before my senior year of college, against my will completely.
Yeah.
And within the first week, I knew it was what I was supposed to do. So finished my business degree, went to seminary, came back at the age of 24 years old, started a church
Sweet.
that I didn't want to start.
Yeah.
And then it's been a wild journey since. So I've been there. It'll be 18 years this September.
That's crazy.
Which means I'm getting old.
Wow.
I'm married and got 4 children, and just I've never had more fun doing what I do right now. So
That's awesome.
long answer long.
I love that. Now, when you first started your church, was it called Embrace? Was that
Actually,
Yeah?
technically, the first 3 months, it was called the New Church.
Nice.
Because we literally didn't have a name.
So how did you guys fall on that name?
Well, I made the bulletin each week back on Microsoft Publisher.
Nice.
And I would literally write the New Church, because I was like, you have to say something. So
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not trying to be cool. I'm literally just trying to describe what we are as the New Church. But we had a bunch of different names that we had, and one was Embrace. And I was like, oh, that's a cool name. I've never heard about a church called Embrace, but I wish there was some meaning behind it. Well, I was reading through the book of Luke, and it's the story of the prodigal son. And it was a translation. I had never read this book, Luke, through, and it says the son kind of takes his dad's inheritance, blows it all, and then in verse 20 it says, so he set off, and while he was still far off in the distance, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran, embraced him, and kissed him. And I was like, man, I've never seen that word embrace before. Through that and a couple other just really bizarre situations, it was just, we named it Embrace. And when I say we, it was me walking, because we didn't have a leadership team. There was nobody except me. So that's how we came up with the name. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And where did you guys first meet? Where did you start meeting?
We met at a church called Sunnycrest, just on the west side of I-29 by 41st Street. We would meet there on Sunday evenings. So they'd have their services in the morning, and then Sunday afternoon we'd set up. And the first 3 years we struggled to survive. We were almost closed several times, because most people in our area, if they think about going to church, it's a Sunday morning, and so we struggled. And 3 years in, we were so close to being closed. We moved to a Sunday morning service, and in one morning we doubled in size.
Really?
And then the next week we grew and grew and grew, and so
That's awesome.
So that's where we started.
I love that.
Yeah. My
That's
office
awesome.
was my 1993 Chevy Cavalier that a high school kid, his family gave to me because he was getting a different, newer vehicle for college.
I love that.
And so I'm like, Lord, I'm very grateful for this gift, but I've now got a master's degree and I'm getting a high school kid's car. I'm like, I don't know how to feel about this.
Right.
But that car literally for 3-4 years was my office.
That's
so
awesome.
I mean, I kept files in it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
treated you well, right?
It got me from A to B.
That's
so I
awesome.
shouldn't hate on my 1993
That's
Cavalier.
awesome. I had a Chevy Cavalier too. I had a bright blue one.
Mine was red.
Muffler fell off of it. I don't know if that happened to yours.
Mine rattled.
Yeah, so I tied it up with like a chain. That was awesome. The funny thing about the Cavalier was the resting position for my windshield wipers was straight up.
No.
So I just drove around everywhere.
Oh
with
my
windshield
gosh.
wipers. I don't know why. It just rested there. So that was fun. So I feel your pain.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's fun to look back, though. I just came across a picture of it the other day. It's fun to come back to realize just those years when you're going through them. You're just like, why am I doing this? Why am I here? And yet, when you look back at seasons like that, whether it's with your career, whether it's with your family, your private life, it's pretty cool when you have those moments of like, wow. Those moments actually really shaped me.
Right.
And now there's so much I don't take for granted because of those moments. And so it's kind of interesting how that can happen.
That's awesome. And that's good. You know, that really, that's something I really believe in is just never forgetting these moments.
Yeah.
I've was part of a few different church startups, and that was a message that I'd always try to make sure my staff kind of understood was like, hey, don't forget these moments when we're tearing down these speakers.
Yes.
After church and putting them back up every Sunday and carrying them into the truck, you know, because once you get to, you know, where God has you guys now, you know, it's just so hard or easy to forget that stuff. Because you've got everything up, you've got your building, you've got all that, but even, the few.
Yeah. Well, even as simple as for me, when I start a message, I'll say, hey, welcome to Embrace. We're so glad that you're here. And I can remember 3-4 years where I literally didn't know if anybody was coming. And that has never left me. And so it's not just, oh, that's what he says when he starts his message. It's like, no, I like feel it in my bones. Like, I can't believe that you've decided to come to this church when there's so many other churches in town. And more than that, you decided to go to church at all. And you decided to come here. Like, what a huge honor that is. And I think those moments are huge for us to remember.
Right. Biggest reason for us to get together, I just kind of wanted to see if you can help us and maybe we can chat through what leadership looks like, but more specifically what leadership looks like in the workplace. I thought it would be really cool to maybe start off by setting like a foundation of what maybe leadership means, right?
Yeah. So there's so many different things that you can define leadership. For me, faith-wise, I'm going to try not to sound too much like a pastor. For me, when I think about leadership, I think about a servant heart, servant leadership specifically, and really, the more leadership you've been entrusted with, the more of a servant heart you need to live out on a daily basis. And the opposite is normally what happens. The higher you get, the more leadership, the more influence you get, the less you're about serving the people around you. And the cards are kind of stacked against you to do that. It's easy to start, writing your own headlines and thinking you're high and mighty, but just that continual, like, no, God, you've put me in this place of leadership, whether it's leading 2 people or it's leading 200 people. You've put me in this place of leadership, and because you have, it's my goal and it's my calling to serve the people that you've entrusted me with. And so for me, when I think about leadership, I think about serving.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, like, we live in a world today where our leaders aren't really the best examples of that. Whether that be in the workplace, maybe in our homes,
in the church,
or even running our country. You know, like we just we have a bunch of leaders in place that just don't put a good example out there. Unfortunately, some do. Not to say they're all bad. But for the most part, I feel like sometimes it's just that's lacking. And it causes such a ripple effect in our society.
And even in that, when I think about that, I constantly reflect on it's easy to highlight that in somebody else and someone else's leadership, but continually for me, it's like, okay, Lord, how can I really apply this to my leadership? I can't control how this person or that person leads, but I'm in control of the way that I lead. And so even just being asked the question and giving you my response, I'm like, okay, Are you doing that, Adam?
Sure.
And so it's just a continually, it's not something that we arrive at. It's really leadership is a every single day choosing to have the heart of a servant to the people around us.
Yeah. And so by choosing that every day, like what's a practical example of what that would look like maybe in the workplace, right?
Yeah. So I think a couple different things. For me, leading up to that, for me to really come in with that posture, first I'd share this, is really, and again, I'm trying not to sound like a pastor, really spending that consistent time with God myself to reorientate my brain that my life in this specific day is not all about me. Because when I wake up, it's all about me. And it's all about what are other people going to do for me today and all this kind of thing. And so for me, I need that time where it's like, nope, it's actually not about me. It's about you, Lord, and it's about the people. It's about the people around me. It can be as simple as listening to the people around you. Just even a few weeks back, the strategy team that reports to me kind of highlighted some things for me of like, hey, Adam, you're kind of running fast, and the team is getting a little tired.
Yeah.
And my first reaction when that was brought up was defensiveness of like, what do you mean? No way. That's what I'm thinking internally. And yet it could be as simple as like listening. Like, no, they care about you. You trust them. You need to take this to heart. And so I think in several years back, I would have blown it off and like, well, the team needs to grow up or something like that. And they said it one time, and I was all ears. I mean, I was like full attention. Take notes of this. So I think listening to your team, it could be just even as simple as like, hey, John, how are you doing today? Not with work. Like how are you doing? How's your soul? How's your family? One of the best ways that we can care for our team is to make them feel seen. By actually seeing them, and not just as a cog in a wheel to produce whatever it is, whether it's for selling cars or reaching people for Christ, but no, like I see you, I value you. So I think one of the best ways that looks by serving is giving our time and our attention. So I think those are a couple of specific things, and then really allowing our teams to lead. That might sound like an interesting thing, and that's a challenge for me. I started the church away from leading worship. I've literally done every task imaginable in the church. But one of the best ways we can serve our teams is to equip them, and then like, hey, I trust you. You're on our team because you're so talented. You got a heart of gold. You love the Lord. You love people. You just go with it. So more and more, I'm just saying, I trust you. For years, I think everybody felt like they needed, probably because of my leadership, what does Adam think? And I'm like, that's not leading. Like, no, what do you think? This is your area, like your boots on the ground. And so I think just even allowing your team to go and to run is a huge way to serve them.
No, that's huge. And I feel like you're saying that from a perspective of, you've done this for a while. There might have been a time in your leadership where maybe that wasn't the case, right?
Not the
case. Kind of where you learned that, right? So tell me, maybe for some of us listening to this, like if you are a leader, like what happens if you're just now internally realizing, wait a minute, like I'm not doing this now, right? Maybe a good example of like you not doing it and how you can grow from that.
Oh, geez. I got many examples. For that person who's just realizing that they're not doing these things, it's never too late to change. If you're still got breath in your lungs, it's never too late to change. And I'm so grateful for that because I've been a work in progress my whole life. Right before recording, I just told you I've never been more unimpressed with myself, and I mean that. So it's never too late to change, and encouragement to take those steps is begin to change. Maybe a first step is self-awareness. Maybe just asking the people around you, and I didn't come up with this question, but what is it like to be on the other side of me? Could be a really huge step of what's it like to be on the other side of me? Well, Adam, you shut people down a lot. Well, Adam, when you come into a room, everybody's on eggshells. Well, Adam, you say you're going to do this, and then you never follow through.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Dang.
Yeah. It's never too late to ask that question.
Right.
And so for me, I've had to ask that question several times. And the example I gave 3-4 weeks ago, the team now feels like they have permission to share that stuff, knowing that it's uncomfortable for me. It's like, oh, geez, what do you mean?
Right.
And yet it's like, no, this is pure gold. And so afterwards I thanked him. But I think it's just continuing to become more and more self-aware, and then continuing to grow and learn as well. I was actually on this specific topic, I was listening to the Craig Rochelle Leadership podcast.
Okay.
And he talked about most organizations are capped because of their leader. And if you feel like you need to be involved in all things, you are the limiting factor. And again, as I was listening, it was like all the tension. And so I brought that podcast up to our strategy team the next week and said, hey, where am I doing this?
Right.
And they shared,
That's
like,
awesome. That's good that you
hey,
got
Adam,
a team that's...
Yeah, you're really in the weeds in this area. And I'm like, I know. And they're like, you just need to trust us with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, So I think it's taking steps. And if you're genuinely wanting to become more self-aware and grow in this area, your team, if they see it, again, whether you're the main person or you have 2 reports, and they'll be pumped. At first, they'll be unsure if it's legit. Of like, is she really wanting to change? Is he really wanting to change? But if they see steps, they'll be all in. Yeah.
And what a great example that is. Just scripturally, I look at the whole thing about leadership, and right away in Genesis.
Yeah.
Like the example of good leadership versus an absent leader, and how quickly things can change if that happens, right?
Yeah.
But the other thing you said too is just you're generally just taking responsibility.
Yep.
Which is so seldom that good leaders do that, right?
It's a lot easier to blame.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I see so many examples of that. I just keep thinking about just, not only just in the workplace, but, I'm a big believer in just being a good leader in your home, right?
Yeah.
So I talk to a lot of fathers, and that's very similar. Like, well, it's my wife would do this better, if my kids would do that better, right? And even in the church, unfortunately, right? You see a lot of pastors are like, we don't have this, we don't have that. They just, But the perfect example of real leadership is, what Jesus did for us. And he took all that responsibility and carried it for us, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many great examples of that in the Bible too, which is so good. You know what I mean? It's so good that to hear you do that, and hear you do that with your team, and that they're open for it. So.
And when you take on the responsibility, it just increases the buy-in of the people around you, and not just in a lip service type of way, but when you're like, nope, hey guys, this is me. If I didn't communicate well, if I didn't bring clarity, if I instead of just like, well, I don't understand how you could have missed that. It's like, no, they missed it, and oftentimes it's not just one person who missed it; it's a group of people who missed it, and so that's on the communicator, or that's on the leader to bring clarity to that. And again, I feel like I wish I would have learned that sooner. I took ownership for something on Monday of this week, and was said, hey, I don't think I brought much clarity to that.
Sure.
In the past, I would have been upset. Hey, how did we miss that? And this time it was like, hey, I don't think I brought clarity on that. And just that difference, instead of like attack mode, it's like, hey, what can I do better in the future? And even ask that specific question on something like this. How can I be better? Oh, Adam, like maybe this or this, instead of full frontal attack on anything, because that does no good at all. When someone attacks me, I'm defensive. But when I say, hey, Adam, what did I miss here? Sometimes it's the simplest things.
Now, building on that, we've kind of laid out some pillars, if you will. Is there anything else we're missing, you feel like? We've talked about responsibilities. We've talked about, looking internally, and setting ourselves up. And in prayer, really, right? Just communicating with God, right?
Yep.
Would you have anything else for us?
Yeah, at the risk of sounding like a pastor, I think to constantly involve God in your leadership, not just even in the morning. So for me, my morning, I'll often listen to a podcast. I'll spend time in Scripture. Right now I'm reading through the book of Romans, and then I just have a notepad that I write out things that I'm processing, things that I'm worrying about. So I'm coming into my day as a leader healthy. But then throughout the day, whether it's a hard conversation or it's trying to navigate or make a decision, oftentimes I'm like, God, would you just be with me in this meeting? I'm not even saying it to the person that I'm meeting with necessarily, but Lord, would you just be with me? Would you guide me? This is going to be a harder conversation. Will you help me to not be defensive? Will you help me to really hear what they're saying?
Right.
And I don't think we do that often enough, even as pastors, but anybody, any follower of Jesus. So I just think asking for God's guidance is a huge thing that we don't tap into nearly enough.
Yeah.
And just be willing to pause even for a minute before we go into a meeting. Lord, would you just guide me?
Oh, it's so
I
important.
know this is going to be hard. Or I know we could see differently on this, and I'm amazed by how that sets the tone inside of me coming into a meeting. And so I think that's something in my own leadership I'm really trying to get better. Well, even before this, I took a moment just on the way over here, like, Lord, if there's something I'm supposed to say, would you just bring that top of mind? And would this be something that would encourage people, challenge people, just uplift people in general? And so I think those simple things can be huge.
Yeah, I love that. And that really kind of leads into kind of what I wanted to segue to a little bit. But just reading some scripture.
Yeah.
Luke 16:10 talks about, one who is faithful in very little is also faithful in much.
Yeah.
And the one who is dishonest with very little is also dishonest with very much.
Yeah.
And have you heard the phrase, how we do anything is how we do everything?
Yeah.
You've heard that phrase, right? And so that's pouring into this topic a little bit of leadership, and that's something that I challenge myself with, right?
Yeah.
Am I doing my very best for God, first of all, right? Am I being lazy with my calling?
Yeah.
Can I pour my time and resources where it's needed? You know what I mean? You're entrusted with the little things first.
Yep.
Right?
No doubt.
And how you take care of that is going to be how you take care of really everything. Right?
Yes.
And if you're a guy like me who's just kind of starting out, I'd love to be, faithful in what God has given me right now in my, little store at Mitsubishi. But I'd also like to be able to show, first of all, him, like, hey, I can do this.
Yes.
And hopefully in the future I can do this, right?
Yep.
So I don't know.
Oh, this topic fires me up because I've seen it be true in my life. And I'm a person who's always, what's to come?
Mm-hmm.
And when I get there, I'm going to do X, Y, or Z.
Right.
And God does this constantly, like, I have you here today, right where you are. Mm-hmm. How are you stewarding what I've entrusted you with?
Right.
How are you stewarding each of these moments? Even with my two oldest, it's been fun seeing them get jobs.
Right.
And one of them just put their 2 weeks in. And so I said, Wilson, I want to make sure you thank your boss, you honor them. The last couple of weeks, any shifts that you got, do your absolute best of your ability. Why? I'm ready to be done, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I get that. But I think those simple moments and interactions, how we treat people. That same son, we went to the DMV to get his license, and I said, when you come up to the table, you say, sir, you would look at them in the eye, you say thank you, you honor them. And I was like, you just have no idea of what those little interactions will do and how you'll cross paths with someone at the DMV again and they'll see you. I mean, it's just those simple things. Right. And so, again, I always get ahead of myself and I'm going to be this person when I get to that place. But it all starts right where we are. And so how am I stewarding my day? How am I stewarding this position? How am I treating my one person that reports to me right now? And doing that to the absolute best of my ability. seeing people, honoring people. This is a little bit of a tangent, but the power of a thank you note. I've just seen that, just God honor that and open up random doors because of a thank you note. But it's just taking that moment of like, no, I see you. I care about you. Thank you for the work you're doing. And it's an amazing thing when we're really faithful right where we are. God just continues to open door after door after door. Yeah. That's true of leadership. That's true of when we steward our finances well, when we steward relationships and conversations, even the smallest interactions with another person. When you just take a split second to really see them, it's like, whoa. And I think God is just so pleased with those simple things. And he's like, I can trust you with this. And I can begin to trust you with more and more and more and more.
Yeah. Specifically in the workplace, how can those things come true there, right?
Yeah.
What would be a good example for people listening to this who are leaders or are managers or are leading a company? Like, what are some good things they can do to kind of build up to that, right?
Yeah, so I think a couple different ways. Lead up every opportunity that you have. If you report to someone, how can you serve them? Not in a kiss your butt sort of way, but in a hey John, I saw this need over here. Is that something I could go for? And I'll find the time myself, so I'm not asking for a raise. I'm not asking for anything from you. I just think if we try to do this over here, that could be really powerful. Oh, I'd love that. Or hey, I see you do this. Is that something I could take off your plate? Yeah, I actually don't like that, and I'm not very good at that. Let me just try and see if I think just serving up can be huge.
Would you say like submitting to that leadership would be key?
I think serving up, looking for ways that you can take on more responsibility, take off pressure off them. I think also submitting is a word. I would even say the word honor, and really serving you. But if you're like, no, actually, I don't think that's a good call to do this side thing. It's like, oh, totally cool, John. I just like, I totally trust your leadership. So I think there's a part of it of submitting. Maybe a better word is honoring, even of just that. Like, hey, John's been doing this longer than I have, and he's ultimately in charge and he's responsible, and so I'm going to default to that. Now, if there's things that are shady or whatever, that's totally different. But I think there's a way of honoring you, even if it's a relationship that you have, speaking in private with you. Hey, John, I do think we can do this differently, instead of like going to everybody else. Hey, I brought this idea to John and he didn't like it and blah, blah, blah. I think even in those simple things of like praise goes everywhere, criticism only goes up to the person who can do something about it, or to the person that I have an issue with. So I think even those small things can open up doors. I also think treating everyone the same, as far as like, how can I get more leadership? How can I grow at Vern Eide or at Embrace? Right. I think it's just intentionally loving people really, really well. And that just seems to open up doors. Absolutely. So it's like, I'm going to go that extra 10% looking for ways to take stuff off your plate or to do what we do better. I'm going to honor you. So if I have an issue, I'll talk to you and say, hey, John, I really disagree. I think this idea is really good, and not dishonor you everywhere else, because that catches up with you somehow, some way. Right. It does. And then that last idea of like, I'm just going to intentionally love and serve people well. And it's just amazing how God just has a hand of things, of like, you end up selling a car to somebody and you give them top-notch service, and you can't help but tell everybody about it, and all of a sudden that gets to so-and-so's ears. Right. I mean, I just got my car washed right before coming here, my Outlander, which is incredible. That's not a paid ad, that's legit. Noah, so I drove something. Noah at Silver Star in town literally just gave me top-notch service, literally right before coming here. And I'm like, when I left, I know one of the owners of Silver Star. The next time I see him, you better believe I'm going to be telling him about Noah.
That's awesome.
You know?
Yeah.
And Noah doesn't know that. But it's just like he saw me. I asked him a quick question, and he hand scrubbed my vehicle for 8 minutes trying to get this off.
Wow.
And so it's like those things, and he had no idea that I know one of the owners.
Right.
And yet I just feel like the hand of God works through those things in a lot of ways. Or that person who's down and out now, and you just went out of your way to care for them and serve them, and 10 years from now, all of a sudden, they end up being the person that you do an interview with.
Yeah.
And it's like, no way. And I'm only 42. I'm not 89, which I'm going to sound like, but it's amazing how those things, after years of consistency and faithfulness, they just stack up and stack up and stack up and stack up. And I think that's true in any field where all of a sudden it's like, Lord, I've been faithful with little, and I've been consistent over time, showing up, serving, honoring, and that just builds up. And all of a sudden, you find yourself in much,
right? And
you're just like, how did this even happen?
Right. Yeah, and that's been such a staple of, like, personally, like, something that I really, truly try to live by, right? Yeah. Because I'm very much like you. I'm always looking towards the future. I'm like, all right, what's next? This is where I want to go. This is where I want to bring my family. This is what I want to do, right? And it's so hard to focus right in front of you sometimes. Switching gears a little bit. Let's talk about, those that are listening who might be listening to this so far and just think, all right, all that sounds really awesome.
Yeah.
But I'm in some gunk right now, whether that be with my family, with my company, or something. Whether you're weathering a storm or something right now, you know what I mean? Like, is there a time in your leadership where Embrace, just things just went south and you weren't sure what to do? What do you do in those scenarios?
Yes. The answer is yes. Over the 18 years, we've probably had 3 different seasons where it's been really, really hard. The last one was 2018. We just went through an incredibly challenging time. And what did I do? I was really honest with God about how I was not doing well. Just as far as like, this sucks, God.
Right. Yeah.
And not sugarcoating it or trying to sound holy, just giving him the unfiltered version of me. So that was critical. Also, what are you trying to teach me through this? Just asking even that question, what are you trying to teach me? Because it feels like I'm being killed right now.
Right.
So what are you trying to teach me? Going to see a Christian therapist to process your anger, your sadness, your bitterness in a healthy way that can kind of be constructive. For me, another thing that brought me through was mentors.
Sure.
Everyone from Jim Lake to Rick Melmer. I mean, I could list off some Rick Post. There's so many different people I could list off that I went to for just guidance of like, hey, how do I handle this? And then another thing that was huge for me was community, having 2 or 3 guys that I could be just really, really honest with.
Which is so hard to find, I'm sure, as a leader, right?
Oh, it's so hard to find. And to be clear, there's a difference between gossip and saying everything I said to all over the place, posting passive-aggressively on Facebook, blah, 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 blah. There's a difference between that and having 2 or 3 of your people that you can just be brutally honest with.
Right.
Of like, hey, I'm feeling hurt, I'm feeling betrayed, and that is so hard to find, but it's one of the biggest gifts. And so for me, those were the different things that really carried me through. I mean, I'll be honest, through 2018, for 6 months, I asked my wife and 2 close friends if I could quit my job every single day. And they said no. And
every day, huh?
Every single day. And they said no, and during that time, I knew I was hurting so much I couldn't trust myself, and I just didn't trust myself to make a wise long-term decision. And so when they said no, I listened, and now it's so crazy. Now I started out by saying this: I've never loved the church I pastor more, and it's the same church. And so I did learn a bunch of things about, we talked about taking responsibility. For the first 6 months, all I wanted to do was blame everybody. And I thought I had legit reasons to blame everybody.
Right.
But then slowly over time, God began to highlight things where it's like, hey, yeah, you didn't do anything morally wrong at all. But your leadership was far from Christ-like. You were running 1,000 miles per hour while everybody else is.
Man, how about like a stab right to the gut? Right? Holy cow!
But that's
because this was during a time where you guys were popping off as a church, right?
Yeah. From the outside, it looked great. Internally, it wasn't. I was my strength, which is my entrepreneur heart to reach people for Christ. Every strength has a dark side to it as well. And so I've never been a yeller or an angry boss, but I have a drive that is just can be trouble. And so I needed to realize that gift is something you need to harness, otherwise it gets out of control. And I think that's true for everybody. Yeah. But it's amazing now how much now, even in the pit of my soul, there's still some things that I'm like angry about, but 95% of it is like, no, that's on you, Adam. And before, it would have been 95% everybody else or 99.9% everybody else. But now it's like, nope, you got to continue to learn. And one of the interesting things, I thought that it was like you kind of figure it out and you're done and it's next chapter. But oftentimes that self-awareness journey and growth journey is a lifelong thing, because I still have this drive and passion. And so I need to continue to harness it and continue to keep it in check.
I love that. That's awesome. And that's really good how you can respond as a real leader in the midst of that stuff. Yeah. You know what I mean? I always like the idea. I think this is from like a movie in the 70s, but you always want to follow a leader with a limp. Have you heard that expression before? I love that. I don't know where it's from. I've heard it in a sermon once in my life. Yeah. And it's just something that's always stuck with me. I'm like, that's so true, right? A leader who's gone through the mess and has made it through and is able to lead others through that too, It's
one of the key attributes I look for in a leader is that. It's one of the key attributes I look for in a mentor. It's one of the key attributes I look to as a person that I want to get close to, is if they're willing to share about that limp. And because every leader has one at some point. Every human has one at some point. And it's such an endearing, it's so weird. We usually try to hide it because we think we can't share our imperfections as leaders. It's actually our secret weapon. When we begin to show other people our limp, it's like, oh my gosh, I want to follow that person. And it's that's one of my favorite quotes is because of that. And that's true of me. I got a whole bunch of limps.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I just walk around like this all the time.
I know. But you see, like every seasoned leader has a limp of some kind. And just to even brag on Jim, it's one of the reasons I'm so drawn to him. He's quick to share about pre-Jesus years and his life and marriage and all that kind of thing. And then even still, I was talking to him about 5-6 months ago, and he talked about going to one of the stores that he didn't really know the team all that well. And as he walked up to the building, he was like, "All right, God, here we go." And he's like, "I still have butterflies, and I've been doing this for how long?" And just even hearing that, I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" I'm so glad that Jim still has those feelings because I still have those feelings. And all of a sudden, it empowered me and encouraged me because my feeling is I've been doing this for 18 years. I shouldn't be feeling this way still. Right. And it's like, no, that means I still love what I do because I get butterflies. That's awesome. That means I'm still learning because I get butterflies. And so that's showing your limp is a powerful thing.
Love that. That's awesome. And I think we should just close with that.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
That's great.
Any final thoughts before we leave? Or should we just walk out and be awkward about this?
No, I think that's everything. I don't know how much when I talk about Jim, I'm not just saying it because I'm in the room. I talk about Jim everywhere.
Sure.
yeah, leadership, it's just a lifelong journey. So yeah, I think it's fun that it's a lifelong journey and that you never arrive, that you continue to grow and grow and grow.
Right. No, I agree 100%. Well, thanks for your time, Adam.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate you guys, and thanks for listening. We'll catch you guys next time.